The murder trial for the 2008 kidnap and killing of 27-year-old Christchurch prostitute Mallory Manning is beginning today in Christchurch. Mallory Manning's body was found in the Avon River in December of 2008, with the arrest of 26-year-old Moha Fawcett 4 years later. Mr Fawcett is defending himself in the trial. One News reporter Lacey Wilson joins us now live from outside the High Court in Christchurch. So Lacey, what's happened there so far?
Well, the Crown have just opened their case here in the High Court in Christchurch. Earlier, the jury was selected. Now, the accused is Moha Fawcett. He's charged with murdering Christchurch prostitute Mallory Manning. Now, the 27-year-old's body was found in the Avon River in December 2008. But even though it was a high-profile case at the time, Fawcett wasn't arrested until 3.5 years later. Now, today, as you said, Peter, Fawcett has elected to represent himself.
Moha Aotearoa Fawcett, you've been charged on or about 18 December 2008 at Christchurch, murdered Ngātai Lynette Manning. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
The Mongrel Mob is a national phenomenon. It is organised as a loose affiliation of independent chapters, and it has a presence in most of New Zealand's major towns and cities. Among them is this place, Napier on the east coast of the North Island. This town played a key part in the early history of the mob. The gang began in the 1960s as a group of disaffected youths from welfare homes and borstals. They claimed they'd suffered brutal treatment at the hands of the authorities. For Gary Gerbis, what followed was revenge.
We had no fear of the system, despised the system for the treatment we got as social welfare kids, man. You know, that was bred into us at 13-year-old kids. At the abuse and the treatment we got from people who were supposed to be our helpers, welfare, huh? Man, they shit on us, man. So
We decided to ship back.
We shipped back. We made them stand up and take notice.
The Mongrel Mob adopted the swastika as a symbol of their rebellion. They turned their backs on many of the values of mainstream New Zealand, establishing a brutal and sometimes savage alternative.
It was a cold, windy Wellington morning, and this homicide scene was about 300 metres long, from the top of Brown Street, down Brown Street, round the corner in Adelaide Road and down to the corner of Girton Terrace.
Quinn recalls this homicide well, as it coincided with another major clash in our nation's history, the 1981 Springbok Tour.
An inspector came to see us and said, "You're going to have to clear the rest of Adelaide Road, get off here, because thousands of demonstrators are going to march to demonstrate against the tour outside Athletic Park, which is directly up Adelaide Road from the crime scene." And I simply said to him, "No, they will not be coming through the crime scene, and we will stand and protect our crime scene to the death." And the demonstration came around into Adelaide Road, about 150 metres away from where we were. And the marshals, very responsible folk they clearly were, because they understood, they'd heard on the radio that there'd been a homicide and that there's an investigation going on, and they corralled their entire demonstration over onto the footpath, and they marched about 2 or 3 wide down the footpath, a great big snake of a demonstration past our crime scene, and didn't disturb us at all.
The dead man was well known to police, none other than local mob president Lester Epps, from the gang pad just around the corner. There was more to this murder than met the eye.
Brown Street itself was just awash with glass. We divided up the street into 10 areas, and we searched each area and we picked up all the glass that was in there, and that was named glass from area 1. We then seized the exhibits from the next area, looked for anything obvious. There was Epps's blood and other body tissue lying in the middle of the road, and then just swept the place spotlessly clean, and eventually we had Brown Street as clean as it had ever been in its entire history.
At the bottom of Brown Street was an old ambulance. The Mongrel Mob's van crashed into a lamppost. Lester Epps had been keeping watch in the van that night before he was attacked. The windows were smashed and there was blood, weapons and clothing fibres throughout the wreckage.
This was clearly good evidence, because if we can find an offender whose jersey matches the fibre in the broken window of the ambulance, this is fairly good evidence that he was there at the time that Epps was being attacked inside the ambulance.
Back at the station, detectives sifted through the fragments of glass, matching evidence from the van to evidence from the street, building a picture of what had happened on Brown Street that night.
The investigation uncovered that the Eastern Suburbs Rugby League club, who drank in the Tramway Hotel, were in constant tension with the Mongrel Mob that also drank in the same pub.
The Mongrel Mob had apparently dealt to one of the league players' cars that was outside the Tramway Hotel. So the league players decided to get their own back and mount a bit of a campaign against the Mongrel Mob.
Before dawn on Saturday morning, the team met up at the hotel car park with weapons, determined to exact a bit of street justice.
Get him, boys.
We think probably between 20 and 30 of them were on Epps in the van before he was aware that anyone was around.
After Mongrel Mob President Lester Epps was left for dead in the middle of a main road, detectives were faced with reconstructing the violent events, piece by tiny piece. The 25-year-old had been asleep in the mob van when he was attacked.
He's let the handbrake off and tried to steer the ambulance down the road. And the very last lamppost in the street, it hits it, and so it can't go any further. So he's being chased down the street by his attackers. The attack on Epps in the intersection of Adelaide Road and Girton Terrace was horrendous. The injuries were incredible and they were never survivable.
Evidence began to mount up.
The investigators who were looking for the suspects, they were going out there and seizing jerseys and jeans and shoes, coming back, and in the soles of the shoes were broken glass, and we were able to later on, with scientific assistance, say that broken glass came from that part of the roadway. That jersey had those fibres in the broken window in that van. Some of the weapons had been just implement handles and such like, and we found one that had a broken end on it, very sharp broken end, and then when we did a crime scene examination where they had gathered, I found another piece of wood that matched that implement handle from the Brown Street homicide scene. And then later on, a detective doing a crime search of a suspect's house came in with the third part of the same handle. So he was struggling to explain why that part of a handle in his bedroom, part at the gathering point, part of it inside the homicide, it sort of like put him right in the box seat.
There was no escaping the evidence from this thorough scene examination, and 11 members of the league club were convicted of manslaughter and sent to prison for 18 months.
His name is Harry Tam, a Mongrel Mob member who's come close to being killed.
We're not particularly concerned about ourselves.
I think when it comes to our families and a woman, that I suppose, yeah, we would have some concerns.
In gang talk, it's called being staunch. But the fact is, in the last few months, Tam himself has been grazed by a bullet in a drive-by shooting. 3 other mob vehicles have been blasted in similar style. The gang headquarters has been shot at in broad daylight. There have been stabbings and attempted murder, all linked to the Vikings in this town.
Normally you expect fairly severe retaliation from the Mongrel Mob, and we've seen it in many places, Wairoa included. Why isn't that happening here?
Well, you know, like I said before, we don't see ourselves in a state of war. We claim our rights like everybody else, the right to defend ourselves. If we're under attack, we'll defend ourselves. And when they have attacked us, they have done very well.
Aotearoa, home to thousands of struggling whānau and crumbling communities. Many of them hard to reach, alienated by society.
They are basically what I refer to as a process of social exclusion by policy intent, because no one's actually hard to reach if you really want to reach them. These group of people, or an underclass of people, exist because we have not, as a society and as government, have not actually put the efforts in and sufficient resources to reach them.
Despite having minimal resources, Harry Tam is reaching out to support, often called upon to settle gang disputes.
This is a lot of what your mahi entails.
Not a lot. I prefer to do less and less of it, but unfortunately there seems to be a pattern emerging that there is more and more of this mahi now. For me personally, yes, my workload in this area has increased since last year. Yeah.
Is that concerning?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we much rather be working with our people on positive things that take our people to much better places than to sit around and try and resolve disputes. But I'm glad that we are available to do that.
Through Harry, we got exclusive access to dispute resolution hui between the Mongrel Mob and the tribesmen. After decades of gang rivalry and murders, there was a sense of positivity in the room.
I was really hopeful that we could go another step further from there.
Yes.
So yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
Because we all live in the same space, bro. So it's good that we're trying to get it on and get something sorted out. Right.
Our network is growing,
When we go away from this, I'll get in touch with Aoranga Tira Te, and he'll start the things rolling back down there.
Yeah.
Amongst some of the most feared men in the country is one who doesn't wear a patch, but an infamous label that he's been branded with for the last 25 years. Today, Mark Stevens walks as a father and alongside the Mongrel Mob as a brother, and he's talking on TV for the first time. You used to be considered one of the most frightening criminals that walked the streets of New Zealand. The Parnell Panther. And some people probably still think that.
Well, I think you'd have to ask my 80-year-old neighbour that lives across the road that I painted her house, is whether she thinks I'm this big bad ogre. Like I said, it's about perception, eh?
And the perception is only reinforced by the trademark shades, the tats the leather and the swagger. But what's changed is not only his name, he now calls himself Mark Tipene, but the faces he presents. There's the manager of a labouring company called Rentabro, set up by the Mongrel Mob's notorious chapter. There's the youth worker in South Auckland, helping teenagers get licences, skills and jobs.
We're wanting to get inside those brains of yours and, and open it up to what I believe is sitting there.
There's the networker, invited to dine with millionaires. And there's the face of the Parnell Panther, a name and a history he's trying to erase.
The investigation to date has established that a number of people have been involved in the kidnapping and murder of Miss Manning, and inquiries continue to identify who those persons are and bring them to justice. As a result of this morning's developments, we are assessing the information we've received, and I would expect that we will interview a number of people associated to this man over the next few days. This morning we advised Miss Manning's partner and immediate family of arrest. Obviously they're happy with the development of the case. I can also tell you that this man is not linked to the semen sample that was recovered from the deceased.
High-profile gang member with a domestic violence conviction is playing a key role within the Royal Commission of Inquiry into state abuse, despite one woman going to police over safety fears. Māori justice campaigner Paora Moyle says two women, including a state abuse survivor, approached the Commission in recent months to express fears over the behaviour of Mongrel Mob member Harry Tam. One of the women also approached police. RNZ has agreed not to release any more details about her case.
An estimated 2,000 Destiny Church supporters rallied at Parliament this afternoon, demanding access to prisons for their rehabilitation programs and millions of dollars in funding. The leader of the church, Brian Tamaki, says his Man Up and Legacy programs have helped hundreds of people turn their lives around, many of whom have spent years in the criminal justice system. But despite putting on a powerful rally and the Justice Minister saying he's open to working with the church, Mr Tamaki is unwilling to formally apply for access to prisons or for funding the way the other rehabilitation providers have to. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Brian Tamaki and hundreds of his supporters made their way onto the grounds of Parliament to deliver a petition to ministers. He told the crowd, including ministers and MPs, that lives have been changed dramatically with his Man Up program.
Inmates and prisoners and people, families that were struggling in our worst places. Man Up helped them. Somehow it works. And I know the secret because I wrote the 4 books.